Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking your time for this. I really appreciate it. As we start, can you maybe talk a little bit about your current role in your company?
You bet. My name is Chris Gaebler. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for a company called Logs.io, headquartered in Tel Aviv, Israel, with a presence in London, Boston, and Kiev, actually. Um, I've been at Logs.io for about half a year. Before that, I was the Chief Marketing Officer of a company called Guardicore, which was acquired by Akamai Technologies. Before that, I was the Chief Marketing Officer for NetScout, also based here in Boston. And before that, I was in Arbor Networks and Kaspersky. So lots of marketing roles and cybersecurity along the way.
Awesome.
And happy to be here.
Awesome. And as a chief marketing officer, what is in your purview?
Pretty big scope here at Logs.io. Very excited to sort of lead and manage and work with a lot of great people in my company over a number of roles. When I think about marketing, the first thing I think about is the brand of the company, the health of the story, and what our position is in the market. So there's teams that focus on product marketing and PR and analyst relations and influencer relations and channel marketing, all the things that ladder up and help the brand presence of Logs.io be stronger. Then, of course, everybody cares about the pipeline. So demand generation and demand conversion and all things leading up to a salesperson taking an opportunity through the sales process and actually working with them on that sales process. But demand creation is definitely on my list. Customer marketing is a big part of what we care about. Logs.io has over 1,200 customers, ranging from Fortune 1000 companies down to small, medium enterprise. We care a lot about those customers. So in addition to delivering them what we expect to be a great technical solution, we also want them to have a great experience of dealing with us as a company. And so we design programs for and with our customers. That's in my scope as well. Those are three things on the list that I care a lot about.
Awesome. Excellent. And as you can imagine, I mean, cybersecurity is such a growing field. It's every time I open TechCrunch or something like that, it seems like every week there is a company raising $100 million at unicorn status, companies going public, Sentinel-1. I think Cyber Reason just filed out of Israel, coincidentally.
Yes,
a lot of
I know
M&A
them well too.
a lot of M&A activity, obviously with Guardicore and Akamai. And it's as a result, it seems there is a lot of interest, not just from VCs and investors, but also from professionals looking to make a transition into cybersecurity and specifically marketing. So for someone who's just looking to make a career, maybe more junior professionals or even students, what would you recommend from your vantage point if you were to give yourself an advice a few years ago? Some of the things to focus on, what would they be?
So I think cybersecurity is a very important field to be in. I think the solutions that cybersecurity companies are almost always beneficial. When you're a marketer, you care about the ones inside your company, but actually the industry, I think, provides the world with a great service. And so it's a very attractive market, not just because it's growing commercially, but because it's actually very important in the world we're creating for ourselves digitally. So one of the things I would say is recognize how hard the job is for cybersecurity professionals. They have a lot of choices. They have a lot of difficult decisions. Most of the time, cybersecurity professionals get noticed is when something goes wrong. And most of the time something's going right because they're making good decisions. And so if you recognize how challenging their world is and looking for a way to now it's actually delivering information clearly and authentically that is valuable for their professional success. So I always think, like any marketer, you would put the audience first. And in this case, it's really professionals on the front line of protecting the infrastructure and data that we all care so much about. And so actually just being authentic and good with them, it matters a lot. You can't spin something in cybersecurity long because the professionals have, short attention spans for just BS. And so, it's a chance to be a very authentic marketer, which I would be curious. It's a quickly changing industry, and technologies are becoming more and less relevant all the time, and threats are changing all the time. And so I think you have to be really curious, like a true reader and listener, and someone who looks for expertise in various corners to bring that back to marketing success. Pay attention to some of the best practices by other companies in the space and see what they're doing well while you aim to be different. So there's a lot of really smart cybersecurity marketers and professionals, and I think just seeing what they do these days is very impressive. So those are some of the things I would tell either my younger self or anyone interested in getting the space. It's an ever expanding market. There's a lot of room for talented people, and it's exciting.
Certainly. Well, you mentioned that the world is changing. It seems like it's the pace of change is accelerating. And from the marketing perspective, I know back in the day, you would put your content in a lead generation page and collect an email and then follow up with that person. You would rely on large scale events like RSA, which I'm actually very curious to go after almost 2 years hiatus. And it's now that people are talking about dark social, that a lot of connections actually happen outside of reach of marketing automation tools that are still focused on capturing intent. And there is always this tension between kind of the need of the sales team to generate leads and kind of an understanding that a lot of the total addressable market, they may not be quite there yet. They're probably in the early stages of problem aware, category aware, solution aware. They're not yet at the kind of selecting vendors or whatnot. So there are all these kind of tensions and challenges. Also, technology is changing. So what is working for you now? I mean, without giving away your secret sauce, what's some of the things that kind of outperform most, maybe even surprisingly so?
You mentioned a few things there that just reminded me of a couple keys that are important for all marketers, certainly in our space. One is to be really clear about who your ideal customer profile is based on who they are, what their pain points are, and what value you can provide to them. I think too often we look at marketing and sales funnels as though volume of leads is better than quality, and it's always quality is better. Mapping what you do well to a very narrow target is always the best way to go. And that can guide a lot of the activities you do, because if you're very clear about who you provide value for and you can identify them clearly, the conversation is more likely to be better for them and more valuable for you. The best case scenario is that you find someone who needs your solution and you have the solution and you move quickly. The worst case scenario is you waste their time. They don't have the time to waste, and now you've wasted your time, and it's just a number on a chart of a bad conversion rate. So I actually think clear targeting is very important. There's a lot more intent-based tools these days than I think there used to be, and those are very valuable for marketers in our space. That helps if you know what things people are searching for, or what suggests that they have an intent to examine change in their status quo that may open themselves up to a new solution. And so we use a lot more intent-based platforms than we used to in the past. I think we look for video is used more. There's a lot of research to say the brain can consume concepts through video form faster than they can on paper. So there's no surprise the evolution of TikTok and other things, just as a way to sort of convey ideas. And so short format videos is something that we've explored more, that convey a concept or an insight quickly, which you can then sort of binge watch your way through. Many of them, but for someone to through a 45-minute video or webinar to derive a couple concepts, you can actually just accelerate the path, offer it up in snackable functions. And that's a value that we look to provide more and look for ways to do that. A lot of storytelling is best told through partners. So the cybersecurity who are often really well positioned to understand the complexity of their customer environments. And if you're a smart vendor, you look for a way to work really well with partners who know your ideal customer profile the best. So partner marketing, video marketing, intent-based marketing, those are some of the things that we look to probably more than we did before. There's a long list of things to experiment with. The other thing is just continuous experimentation. Like, there's much better data now. So marketing operations is a function that 10 years ago would have been thought to be sort of a nice to have function, and now it's central to what we do. And just looking at data and being smarter about programs and enables you to test and be more creative. Those are some other things we do.
Certainly. And you said partners, you mean channel partners, right?
Exactly, channel partners. There's also technical partners, which can also help, and integrations and things like that, or working with some of the big platform players. But I meant, resellers and value-added resellers and MSSPs and things like that.
I understand. And then you mentioned ideal client profile. Would CISO be kind of your ultimate champion? Is it maybe a VP director level? Who would be your kind of best champion?
For the Longzio security solution, it's actually someone running a security operations center. So a director of a SOC, or someone who works closely with the DevOps team, and we help evaluate the software performance and look at basically a cloud-based SIM. And so people who are close to security operations are the ones that we focus the most on. I would say our approach to a CISO is that they're very important, obviously, and instrumental, but most CISOs don't buy our software, they just let it off for a team that comes and recommends it. And so what we try to do is make sure the CISO is comfortable with the recommendation from a true user of our software who works for them. And so I would say wherever that is in the organization, we try and find the champion most likely to care a lot about our product, and then make sure that our credibility is substantial to the CISO and the other senior decision makers on the team. I find that when you only approach the CISO as your point of entry, you're often just sort of like, handed off to a team who then has to sort of like evaluate the CISO's recommendation when they're actually closer to the problem. I find the best CISOs are the ones who let their teams choose their tools, and they're evaluating the relative effectiveness and ROI of it.
Certainly. And so let's say head of a security operations center, if you create content, you mentioned short form video, you work through partners, you're telling your story, and then you hopefully move them through the funnel. Sometimes there are certain questions. I mean, I brought up this concept of dark funnel or dark social, as they say. If you were to ask them a question, like a candid question about how do you educate yourself about certain problem, how do you select vendors, to find out how do they make decisions, where do they go for information, what would some of those questions be?
I always ask people when I interview new employees what they've learned over the last 12 months. And what decisions they've made over the last 12 months that were not something they made a decision on before. I would apply the same to a cybersecurity purchaser. What's a brand or a solution that you've bought in the last 12 months? There's always something. Either they bought a new training platform or a new part of their firewall or a new microsegmentation solution. And I asked them how they got to that decision. Granted, that is a very sort of like after the fact view, and they may not remember what the initial engagement was, but it does help them sort of like think about like the moments of trust that were built along the way. They had a conversation with a peer who used that platform. They had a conversation with their reseller who was recommended it these days. They may have had a conversation with an analyst at Gartner or Forrester or somewhere. And so you start to piece together that it's a multi-step pathway that they went through. Probably they did some search and probably they did some research and things like that. But I always ask them what they did in the last 12 months. And they always come up with some answer. And it's interesting for me where they put that in context. I also sometimes ask them where it is on their stack of priorities. Everybody walks around with a priority list, whether it's for a house chore list or whether it's for a work project list. And sometimes you find out that you fit into their 7th priority. Probably not going to get done real soon. So you wonder what's ahead of you and how do you get up to be in the top 3? You always want to sort of be somewhere near the top of the list.
Interesting.
And so I asked them how they make the decision on what the priority list is driven from and who's driving that prioritization, which also may lend itself to understanding how some decisions may get made.
Interesting. And so it's actually not only you're benchmarking yourself for someone you may consider a direct competitor, but also versus other projects and other kind of priorities on their list. It's very interesting.
Equally important to me because, if they're really needing to change their endpoint security and you're a firewall provider, but their endpoint is a real problem, the firewall competitors aren't even going to get the time of day because they've got a burning problem.
Exactly.
Or if they're, if they have a compliance challenge they're trying to resolve or whatever it is, if you can associate yourself with that problem, you can get in.
Certainly. It's very interesting. Well, you mentioned a lot of things that are kind of new and working, like intent data and things like this. Let's say you have a crystal ball that can see into the future, and 12 months from now, cybersecurity marketers, what will be the top 3 things they will be thinking about or using or getting good results from, you think?
Well, for sure, more data will be the answer because it has been for so many years. Just better, smarter data. Something around that I think will be valuable. I always dream about tool reconciliation in our space. Like the MarTech stack is as complicated, I think, as the cyber security tech stack. There's so many different tools. It'd be nice to sort of connect them and bridge them better. I think a lot can be done in terms of video optimization. How people can consume video better. Those could be on the list. I think the key is I think it will be driven from where cybersecurity decision makers are getting their information. And I would say, even though we're in the easing out of the COVID era, the event management part of marketing is really sort of adapted to a more digital, visual, virtual, hybrid kind of activity. There could be something there too. I don't think pure full-scale events are going to come back for a long time. Like your RSA dream and mine, I don't know that we get back to 2018 levels. So if your thing is pure events, physical events, I don't know, but there's been so much innovation for how we connect online. Just a way to convey information quickly, even for the buyers. So I would just say there probably could be something in digital platforms that enable cybersecurity buyers to efficiently connect with good decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It hasn't been the virtual trade show. That has not been the solution.
It's actually very interesting because my background is a little bit in a conference space. So I'm I tend to still keep my hand on the pulse, and your perspective is very interesting because I think as a counterpoint, there is a certain level of Zoom fatigue, and as some people do come out of kind of COVID restrictions, but this hybrid work or work from home is, at least in certain environments and certain companies, is a thing that will stay and going forward. And I think people do crave human connection, and maybe not a large scale, as you mentioned, but certainly kind of maybe small scale dinners that are local.
No question. People crave it.
It's something that will come back. But and actually, my last question will be on that topic. It seems whether same scale or not, it seems RSA and Gartner, for whatever reason, this year is going to be at the same time. So which one is it will be for you, or maybe neither?
Gartner's probably a little more relevant for us. I do think RSA is the industry standard security conference, and it's a great event. I've always thought RSA has been put on well. Gartner has a lot of value for our kind of decision makers. I agree with your point that both could be valuable to go to, but I think we'll probably send teams to both.
I see. I understand. Chris, thank you so much for your time. This was
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Greatly appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.